Joining us now on Radio Row here at the 2017 ACC Football Kickoff is the director of the Football Bowl Association, Wright Waters. Wright, great to see you here this morning. Day number 2 of the ACC media festivities. I know you were down at the SEC. How do you like it here so far?
Oh, you know what? I spent 10 years in Nashville as commissioner of the Southern Conference, so this is like coming home. I love it. But it's amazing how this town is growing.
You know, when I first moved here 7 years ago, I actually lived in Asheville for about 20 months or so until I made it over to Charlotte. My son was going to school at UNC Asheville. It's a very unique place to live over there in the mountains.
That's nice, Mojo. I like that. Unique place to live. Yeah. I refer to it as an eclectic community.
When you float around from the SEC media days to here to the kickoff, I don't know if you're going to any of the other ones. How does this compare to the SEC? I mean, you just come from Alabama, you get here now. What? It's
interesting, and it's. Remember now, this is a guy that was a commissioner for 24 years, so have seen some of this over the years. But there's a cultural difference, and this one is one of there's a spirit of. A little bit of more of a spirit of cooperation. I've always thought that the ACC was one of the great leagues that was committed to all sports and to the academics and to where in the SEC there's such a focus on football, and that intensity of that focus makes it a little bit different. But there's certainly you walk into the room and there's more of a welcoming spirit here.
All right.
If that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. We're talking with Wright Waters, the executive director of the Football Bowl Associations. For people listening, the Football Bowl Association, 41 bowls. What exactly do you guys do at the Football Bowl Association?
Well, when I retired in 12, I stayed retired for 2 months. And the Bowl Association has seen tremendous growth. Remember now, 25 years ago, we had 12 bowls. Today, we have 40 bowls. And so they called and said, hey, before you really retire, how about helping us get a little better organized, a little better structure to some of this rapid growth that we're experiencing in bowls? So my responsibility is not only to give it structure, but also serve as kind of a conduit between the bowls, the NCAA, the bowls and the commissioners, visit with folks like y'all and say, okay, here's some misconceptions of the bowls, because there was nobody really speaking for all of the bowls. And so we answer those questions like, why do we have to have 40 bowls? And are institutions really losing money going to bowls? And, those are those misconceptions that are out there.
All right, that's going to lead me to my next question. You mentioned 12, now 40, 41 if you count the national championship.
No, remember we lost the
that's right.
Poinsettia, so it's 40 this year.
Okay, so it is 40. Okay. Mm-hmm. But people that are critical of the bowl system say there's too many because there's not quality, it's just quantity, because when you're putting 5 and 7 teams in bowl games, why are you rewarding somebody for a losing season? I'm just asking you the question because that's what people ask me.
I think that's, let's go through it. First of all, why do we have 40 games? And the answer is because in the mid-2000s, we increased the number of regular season games from 11 to 12. And when we did, the standard for becoming bowl eligible became 6 and 6. And the rewards of going to a bowl are so significant that a team that's 6 and 6 staying at home really puts themselves at a competitive disadvantage. Lose the practice time, lose the recruiting opportunity, lose the national visibility. You got fans that don't get to go to a bowl game, don't get to beat their chest that my team is in a bowl game, all of those things. So that's given rise to an increase in the number of bowls to make sure that all 6 and 6 teams have a place to go. But the complication is, can you tell me now how many bowls we'll need next year? How many 6 and 6 teams we'll have? And the answer is no, you can't. Only 2 years ago did we have to dip into the 5 and 7 pool. People act like we've been taking 5 and 7 teams forever.
No, that was a big controversy last year when you had the 2 5 and 7 teams.
Yeah, we had 3. 2 years ago, we had 3 5 and 7s. Last year, we had 2 5 and 7s. And we don't know where we'll be this year because we've got one less bowl than we did last year. Maybe we hit the number on the head again. Who knows? But now you've got to keep a bowl from going dark, because bowls have, at the request of 2 conferences, set up in a community a bowl game. They've made contracts with hotels. Can you imagine going to a hotel 2 weeks before a team is supposed to report and say, oh, by the way, I know we reserved 500 rooms, but not going to happen this year. And those things can't happen. The TV rights, the radio rights, all of those things have been let at the request of 2 conferences. And if they ever go away, they won't be back. So now you got to fill. You can't let the bowl go dark. How do you do it? And the answer has been, we'll take the 5 and 7 teams and we'll rank them based on the APR scores, the academic rankings. And very honestly, guys, I'm okay with that. If you know, what a hell of an idea to reward teams who have, you know, become academically successful instead of always penalizing. So the 2 teams last year, North Texas and Mississippi State, were ranked 1 and 2 in the academic performance rating based on all the 5 and 7 teams. So, you know, you'd love to hit the number on the head. Yep. But you know what? Remember always that Murphy works in intercollegiate athletics, and the worst that can happen will happen at the worst opportunity. So that's why we have the number of bowls we have. And the fact that, you know, every one of them is unique. And I think where we get in trouble also is we think that all of them ought to be the Rose Bowl, all of them ought to be the Sugar Bowl. They're not. You know, it's the same ball. It's still got 13 pounds of air in it, you know, in the Bahamas and in Pasadena. But, you know, there's a lot of other things that aren't, you know, the same thing. But for those 2 teams that have the opportunity to go to the Bahamas, it's a trip of a lifetime. How many of those kids will ever go out of the country again? How many of those teams will ever go back? Kids will ever go back to the Bahamas? You know, 4 days, 5 days at the Atlantis in Bahamas in December is not bad. And so as long as we can understand that every bowl game is not designed to be the national champion, but every bowl game is designed for an educational opportunity and a different experience, that's a good thing.
Well, that was one of the things last year that me and him were talking about when Charlotte, the 49ers, were trying to make their push to hopefully get in the first bowl. We were looking at all the possible places that we could have went. You know, we were talking about jokingly what we could afford to go and where. But one of the other questions that you mentioned earlier that you field a lot is the money side of it. The schools claim they lose money. My question about that is, when you have the bowls spaced out as far as they are, if a school like Charlotte, the 49ers, get into a bowl at 6 and 6, and they got to go to Bahamas or they got to go somewhere, how much do they really make? Because that is a trip for them to go to the Bahamas. They got to pay for the flight. I mean, what goes into that?
It varies. And in the case of the 49ers, the Conference USA has really done a nice job of their honorariums. One of their bowl games is in Hawaii, and I think their honorarium to go to Hawaii is significantly more than their honorarium for a team to go to New Orleans. And so what happens is bowls make contracts not with schools, but with conferences. Last year, the bowls paid out $616.8 million to 10 conferences, BYU and Army, who were the 2 independents in bowl games last year. Even after the schools paid all of their expenses, there was still $500 million in net dollars to the 10 conferences. But conferences will set an honorarium for a trip to a bowl, and then it's up to the school to either live in that number or come back and wait till May when the conference makes its distribution and say, okay, we'll balance it all off that. unfortunately, sometimes you have a business manager that doesn't understand there's a check coming in May, and they say, we lost money going to a bowl. The other thing, sometimes somebody goes to the Sugar Bowl one year, and they take everybody and his brother, and then the next year they go to another bowl that perhaps the conference has not set that honorarium that same level, but everybody and his brother still wants to go. So, it's one of those things. But is there money? The net to the conferences range from $13.5 million all the way up to $100 million last year in net dollars. So when conferences at the end of the year say we're going to send $25 million to each school, most of that money's TV money. Some of it's NCAA championship money. Some of it's bowl money.
One of the things we do is we do a lot of high school basketball, football, and we were trying to talk about, doing like our own little version of like a tournament, for a day. And then we joked around, obviously, with the amount of bowl games that we should, get a bowl. How does somebody go about, or a business or a company, how do they go about, pitching an idea to you about,
you'd be amazed.
Here's a bowl?
You'd be amazed how many times I get that question, because there are communities all over the country that say, gosh, it's got to be great to have a bowl game. Well, the truth of the matter is not as easy as you think. And the first step is you've got to have two conferences that will commit teams to you. And not, ACC 14 versus SEC 14. That's not a commitment. That's a dream. That's a fantasy, and you'd be amazed at how many times communities say, well, we'll have ACC versus SEC. You better go talk to those conferences and see if they'll give you a number that will fit into their historical number of bowls that are of top teams that are actually bowl eligible. So that's number one. Then the second thing is you've got to have a national TV rights deal. So you got to go to one of the national TVs. You got to have a stadium, and stadiums are everywhere. And it's largely dependent on what kind of crowd you can expect based on who you got coming. You don't want it too big. If, that we've got stadiums that are seat 25,000, but they're also hosting conferences that don't average much more than that during the year. So, if you've averaged 20,000 all year, you're not going to suddenly bring 100,000 because you're going to a bowl game. So you got to have that. You got to have a title sponsor, and title sponsors are regulated very tightly by the NCAA. They have to meet the same standards that NCAA sponsorships meet. So that's another piece. And sometimes there's a local community sponsor who says, "I want to be on it," and then all of a sudden they find out it doesn't fit the NCAA's image. So you have to meet all those. And you know what? As soon as they start going down that checklist, a lot of them say, I think we'll rethink that.
Wright Waters, Executive Director of the Football Bowl Association, joining us here on the Carolina Sports Network. Here's another criticism that I get, and I'm a big fan of the bowls. I love bowl week.
You're like me, Mojo. I never met a bowl I didn't like.
Yeah, okay, but here's people that will say to me, how can you watch that bowl? He says there's nobody in the stands. It's in a cold weather city, and it's only there for ESPN and degenerate gamblers. Those are the criticisms that I get thrown at me about the bowls. How do you answer people like that?
You got a remote control. Turn it off.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying.
I'm serious.
Yeah.
Nobody's got a pistol in anybody's head that says you got to watch it. But the rest of the story is there are people watching it.
Right. I'm saying
when you look at the TV ratings for the bowls in the month of December and the month of, they're higher than most of, with the exception of the NFL. They're higher than the other professional franchises. They're higher than reality television. They're higher than, daytime television. So people are watching. Over 2 million people went live to bowls last year, And at the end of the day, if nobody's in the stands, there are two teams there that have a unique opportunity to celebrate a regular season. And you know what? That's a pretty special time for those two teams. And at the end of the day, we're all in the student-athlete business.
You know about the bigger bowls, but you just mentioned, what is the attendance like at some of these smaller bowls, the ones that, people, not us saying it, but some people don't like?
some of it is, I understand the criticism. I mean, the example is what we talked about earlier with the Bahamas Bowl. And, Bahamians haven't quite grasped college football, but it's increasing every year. And so you have college football spreading to a new market, and that's important. And, some of it's a matter of who's in the game. And that's been a big issue over the years, is there are teams that will bring crowds, and there's teams that don't bring crowds. So, it's how many are there? It varies so much year for year. I think we're seeing the bowls get back focused to where they were in the 90s, and trying to get the local community more and more involved in that.
Last one before we let you go. I know you got to make the rounds. 40 we're at right now. We're going to stay there for a while, go down a little bit. I mean, how do you see the numbers?
Well, 3 years ago, the NCAA passed a moratorium on new bowls, which expires with the 2021 season. So from now until then, I think when we come out of this moratorium, you'll see the data on how many bowls a conference has generated. I mean, how many bowl-eligible teams a conference has generated over that period, so that if the ACC's number is that every year their average is 10 teams, I think you'll see them contract for 10 bowls. And I think that number will be about where we are now, because I don't think we're that far off on filling the needs. The numbers of FBS teams goes up 2 this year. What will be the impact of that on the numbers, don't know. But UAB comes back and Liberty becomes an FBS program. How that'll impact that number, I don't know. We just have to wait and see.
Wright Waters, you're awesome. I could talk bowls with you all day, but I know you've got other people to talk to. But we will get you back here. I mean, college football is the best, and I can't wait till December when the bowl season kick off. But I got to get this regular season out of the way first.
You're absolutely right. It is a uniquely American game. And the great thing about college football, nowhere else in the world do we have this system of sports with higher education. And a lot of it is because we're teaching lessons in sports that aren't available in the classroom. Where else do we teach teamwork and time management and risk-taking and goal setting like we do in college athletics?
It's the best.
It's the best.
Thank you so much. Have a great season, and we'll talk